Welcome to the Insights to Communicate podcast with Adam Probalski, where communications, research, and strategy come together.
Don Kruger, welcome to the podcast. So happy to have you here.
Great to be here. Thanks a lot for inviting me.
So you are at Contra Costa County in California, and you are doing communications and media relations. And I'd love to just kind of hear the day in the life of Don Kruger as someone who does comms and outreach and media relations and kind of focusing in on what you do every day. Tell the world what it is that someone in your position does.
Okay, well, I'll make this week my example, which I don't know if it should be because it might scare people away. So, this like today, for example, and this week. So I work for it's the clerk recorder elections department specifically, and so clerk recorder, vital records. It's also kind of recording documents and the like. And then on the election side, there's something coming up in November. I don't know if everybody knows about that, but that gets a little busy. And so we're just kind of actually already prepping for that. And we have 3 what we're calling candidate workshops that our office is putting on that I'm kind of logistically managing, where we're giving it sort of like running for office 101. So we have 3 of those. We've been getting those set up for the last few weeks, and those are all. So we had one Saturday, we had one Monday, we have one today, and in the separate parts of our county, we have about 1.1 million people in our county, maybe a little bit more, but that's about where we are, 1.1, 1.2.
Yeah.
And we have about 710,000 registered voters. So we're putting those workshops up for anybody who might be interested. And then I'm also part of a committee that's running the county block party, which also happens to be this week. So we have about 50 different county offices, departments, and some CBOs and some departments from the city of Richmond. And we're all kind of putting this, it's like a block party to showcase all the services throughout the county and in the city of Richmond and some of the CBOs. And that's going to be tomorrow evening. So I've been prepping for all of that. And then, there's the mundane trying to put up all of our social media, making sure I'm answering any calls about anything happening, putting out press releases that need to go out or getting those prepped anyway, because there's a few that need to go out for the election. So I guess that's just sort of a taste. I won't bore anybody with all the details, but that's a taste of what my day-to-day is.
That seems like a lot of things. Most people have like one big thing they're dealing with or one event. So I'm interested in your how to run for office work because you don't have to do that. As a public agency, you have to be there. Your office doors have to be open. Someone has to be able to, file paperwork, and you have to be able to accurately count results of elections. Like that's kind of what you're charged with doing. You don't have to do the other stuff. What's the big motivator behind telling people how to run for office when you don't have to? Like, why do you want to do that?
So I came into this job from the nonprofit sector, right? So I come from the kind of perspective of, we need to really be offering information to everybody so that anybody who's eligible can vote, anybody who's eligible can run for office. There needs to be transparency. It needs to be accessible. That's really my perspective, and that's where I'm coming from. So, that's why, I think that these particular workshops are so important because there's no charge. It's just us offering this service. We're in the 3 separate parts of the county. We have East, West, and then there's Central South County. And we're trying to make it accessible because not everybody can, it's California. Our freeways are bananas out here in the Bay Area sometimes. We have Highway 4 that gets backed up and it takes hours for people to get home. So just trying to, really make it accessible for folks. And so that's really the perspective I'm coming from. I think it's very important that we make that accessible and that people understand that, yeah, there's a lot you have to do, but it doesn't have to be sort of behind a veil, if you will.
Sure. I think that's great. Working in government and around government, everybody talks about transparency. And the truth is, the public thinks that government isn't transparent, even though government is extremely transparent,
Yes.
especially local
Yes.
government, where, like, government is an open book. But I think it's great to kind of show them, demonstrate to them, and be able to have great examples. That's awesome. So you touched on it, and I'm fascinated by your background. You spent like more than a decade in the nonprofit world,
Yes.
and I think it was Big Brothers Big Sisters,
That's right. Yes.
and it's kind of like going from a place where everybody kind of knows the brand for the most part and really loves what you do. There's no one who like thinks you're doing something bad. And then you go into government where there's a lot of people who think, everything government does is bad. How was that transition? First of all, what attracted you to go to government? And then how was that transition for you?
Yeah, it's actually really it's funny because I, like you said, I was over decades. So I was about 16 years at Big Brothers Big Sisters. Still love the mission. It's an incredible mission. It's a great organization. And nonprofit work is daunting. It is relentless. It is incredibly you know, stressful, all those things. And so when I left Big Brothers Big Sisters, I thought, gee, I still want to serve the public. That's really kind of at my core. It's very important to me that whatever I'm doing, I'm serving the public. So I was very specific in my search when I was trying to find my next thing. And I studied political science in school, so I thought, oh, I'll go into government, and wow, let's see what it's like in clerk recorder elections. Maybe that'll be less stressful. And that was not. I mean, it was post 2020, so it was a whole different ball of wax. Very interesting. So there is that aspect. It's not just the fact that folks, in some cases aren't necessarily completely trustful of government. It's also that, the whole kind of elections landscape has just absolutely blown up. And it's just very different now than, maybe it ever was. I think there's so much less trust, which is very unfortunate, and, gives me a lot of opportunity to flex the communication muscle here and make sure that we're getting the word out and making sure people know what we do.
That's great. Talk a little bit about, if you can, about media and what your interaction is and how does that work? I think people are fascinated by how someone in government interacts with a reporter, someone in government communicates with media, and what that process looks like. Is it very formal, or is it just as loose as any of the rest of us just getting a call and having a quick conversation? Do you have to go through some chain of command? How does that work?
Yeah, it's interesting. My colleague that I work with here at the office, he actually said, and he's been an elected, and he's our deputy clerk here. I think he actually has said it very well, which is it used to be, particularly I think in elections and probably government in general, that if you were in the news, it was a bad thing, right? You tried to stay under the radar, stay out of the news. If they were putting up news about you, it's generally speaking not great. And so coming in, it's we're trying to kind of come from a different perspective, right? You need to build the relationship. You need to keep the lines of communication open. You need to make sure, it goes back to this transparency piece, right? So that people understand that, we are your government. If you want to come and see what we're doing, we have open doors. And whether that's the public or that's media, I think it's just incredibly important. So I think that's really sort of the angle that we take. So we have open lines of communication. We make sure that the media knows whenever we're testing equipment, whenever we have any of our programs in here to sort of look at elections in particular, see what we're doing. On the clerk recorder side, we actually have some really great programs too that the media loves to come to. I'll say we have something called Destination Weddings. We have some fantastic parks here in Contra Costa County. We have Mount Diablo, which is beautiful. We have the John Muir House here in Martinez, actually, which is the city I work in. We have a lot of wonderful places, and we actually have weddings at those locations. We'll partner with our California parks and the federal parks, and we'll do weddings at these locations with no extra charge. It's just something that we're offering our residents for kind of a special thing. So, it's really important to bring the media in ahead of time so that if you do end up having this issue where, oh geez, something kind of didn't exactly go right. We are run by humans and humans make errors on occasion. So, if that does happen, you can sort of call your, contacts in the media and say, hey, look, this happened. Just want to give you a heads up, and whether that's sort of a press conference or whatever. Hopefully it's not to that degree, but to the same degree, it's like you can call those folks and say, hey, I just want you to know this happened, give you the heads up, and I'm happy to talk to you about it.
That's great. I think people sometimes don't recognize how free flowing those conversations can be, and how it's, it's not like being on CNN and it's adversarial, or there's a gotcha question from the local reporter. It's
Right.
usually, here's the facts, how else can I inform you? So in your position, do you get to check out? Do you get to take a day off? Do you get to take a vacation? Or is this phone always nearby because there might be a crisis?
So, it's interesting. That was actually one thing kind of coming into this position from working at Big Brothers Big Sisters that was a bit of a change for me, which I think is good, right? And I think it depends on what time of year it is too. So basically, yeah, I do kind of get to check out a little bit. Like I'm not completely offline. I mean, my boss has my cell number. They can text me, and I leave that here.
Right.
So that was actually something that was new to me, right? Like I was used to just sort of the grind, right? Like it was a 24/7 job, stress all the time. And coming into this position, it really was a little different to where you actually can, go home and leave the work at work. And that was really important to me. I will say that as we get closer to the election, and particularly this November with the presidential election, and a lot of what's kind of going on across the nation and everywhere, in our county and everywhere, it does get a little bit more sort of ramped up and busy, I guess I'll say. But I do think that there is sort of that opportunity. Like I'm going on vacation next week, right? And I'll have my cell phone, but I'm gonna set up the social media. And the other thing is, I'll say I am essentially let's say a 1.5 person show. Like this is me, and I have a desk behind me where my social media intern, who works 15 hours a week, sits on Tuesdays when she comes in. So it's not like this robust, huge department. We are looking to hire a couple new people soon. And we also work at the pace of government, so soon means probably January, but that's besides the point. So,
I think that's great. I mean, I think there is great value in work-life balance. I don't really get much of it, but I do want my staff, and I think it's smart to have your government communicators or government people in general having a chance to not have to work. So you're on when you are working, right? And you can have those breaks.
Absolutely.
But yeah, the fact that you're always a little bit on call is kind of just the reality of how the world works. So you touched on this idea of kind of setting things up ahead of time. Talk a little bit about your tech stack. Like, what does that look like? What kind of tools do you use for social media and for press releases? And how do you get the word out? And what are those like unique pieces of software that are so critical to your daily work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I use Hootsuite. That's my, that's what I use for posting on social media. I will say it's so interesting working in government. There are a lot of sort of rules that we have to kind of work around, or follow, I should say, not really work around, follow. But there are a lot of rules, and there's new rules being created, with a lot of these issues in technology. But I will say, so Hootsuite, that was kind of a lifesaver to me. I came in, and, it's like, and I think a lot of my colleagues still sort of post, one off on each of the different platforms. And we have, 6, 7, 8, 10 different platforms, because I have 2 divisions that I'm managing social media for. They're very different. It's very different messaging, what you're trying to do. And so I have different platforms for the clerk recorder and elections, and I'm, posting different things about what those 2 departments, or excuse me, divisions are doing within the department. So, it's critical to be able to just have one place where I can post, put things up, post them. I mean, I will say that, I don't necessarily have the time to, you know, be so specific in terms of each of those platforms. But, you know, Hootsuite really helps me to get that stuff up and do it quickly. And I can do it on my phone. You know, I will say we do have TikTok,
Okay.
which I know is sort of an issue for some. And it's, you know, right now there's some things going on at the federal level, you know, wait and see in terms of what's going to happen with that. But we started TikTok. That is actually, we've had to put that on its own phone. And I'll say, you know, I was able to kind of glean some information from another government entity and how they kind of dealt with it, where they just had a phone that was not a government phone. It was really just sort of separate and not on the network, because we don't, you know, there's all these rules.
Right.
And so we have a separate phone. And because we felt it was super important for us, especially on the election side, to reach young people, reach a broader audience, because a lot of the young people who don't show up to vote are on TikTok. So we want to get the right information out on the platform that they're on. So, you know, I will say that TikTok is sort of a separate thing, but otherwise I'm using Hootsuite. And then, you know, I'm trying to think some of the other, we do, you know, that's the other thing with government, you do have to archive everything. So we do have, through our county, we do have an archive software that we use.
Cool. So you talk about TikTok. Video, I think, is intimidating to a lot of people in general and government communicators specifically, because if you don't have in-house resources, you've got to hire a consultant. And I think there's been historically some push towards like a highly professional, perfectly created video, but that's not how it's done these days. It's very authentic. It's very, you know, raw.
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about how you produce a video for TikTok?
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually probably one of the most fun parts of my job, I have to say. So we have a committee. We have a clerk recorder committee and we have an elections committee, which means we have staff from each of those divisions. We meet twice a month and we come up, you know, we just brainstorm ideas like, what do we want to do? What are some of the trends? Do we, you know, can we do this? I mean, that's, you know, that is part of it. Some of the TikTok trends, it's like, nope, can't put that up. That's not appropriate. But some of them we can, and they're so much fun. I mean, I think, you know, yeah, there's some staff that's like, oh, well, give me a heads up. So, you know, and we were like, okay, guys, hair and makeup, you got to do your hair and makeup. We're coming in on Tuesday. But it's so fun to watch some of these videos and, you know, the staff gets into it and, you know, and it's also fun when you actually like end up getting a lot of views. I mean, we're not, you know, kind of at the highest level or anything like that, but we're definitely, you know, increasing our followers, we're increasing our views, which is great. We're getting more interactions. And we just did actually a video that we put up yesterday on TikTok that's so fun. There's a trend, I guess, where you're like, it's pretend fighting and it's, you know, it's kind of choreographed, but it's pretend fighting. And, you know, you ask questions and every time somebody sort of throws a punch, there's a question. And then the next punch, there's an answer. So some of our staff did it. And, you know, with the TikTok phone, we just say, hey, check it out. You know, there's a sign out sheet and go, you know, take it around and, you know, do whatever, you know, we're trying to film. So I feel like our videos end up being super authentic. And we were actually like crying, laughing because of the way that this video turned out. It was so great. And the social media intern that we have, you know, put it together where she did sort of here's the video, and then she did the bloopers, which I think the bloopers were the best part, but it was so funny. So, you know, it's really fun. And I think it's important, like you said, be authentic. We're not trying to, you know, make it some super fancy thing. It's just authentic. This is what we're putting up. We're trying to educate people about, you know, what we do on the clerk recorder side, but also, you know, on elections, like the true story about what's happening here so that people understand it, you know. And it really is. It's fun. There's all these great new ideas and we sort of, you know, see what's kind of trending and try to keep up with that. But then we joke, you know, yeah, we're the government. It's going to be a little behind the times. That's just how it rolls.
And that's okay. Yeah.
Yes.
You're probably not going to go viral, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so coming from nonprofit world, and I imagine you have some sort of like mantra or some sort of theme that runs through your head, words of advice? Is there something that you live by?
Oh, wow. I mean, yeah, I mean, I guess in my personal life and my professional life, I run by man plans, God laughs. I mean, I think that can be kind of what my mantra is on all levels, right?
Sure.
And I think it's just important to understand, like, you can plan to the, biggest or smallest detail. You just got to leave room for something's not going to go exactly the way that you planned it, and just kind of roll with it and figure out what your plan B is going to be. I mean, I think that is, in life, that's just where we're at.
Uh, I see that in grand form in my life for sure. So yes, being flexible or rolling with it,
Yes.
critical in all walks of life.
Yes.
Dawn, thanks a ton for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. It's been great. I really appreciate it.
This has been Insights to Communicate with Adam Probalski, president of the woman and Latina-owned market and opinion research firm, Probalski Research.